In the warm glow of a theater screen, when an action hero leaps across obstacles or a heartfelt confession brings two estranged lovers back together, all beneath a dazzling sunset, do we ever stop to ask ourselves where these visual cues come from? Why do they speak to us so deeply? Strangely enough, we owe much of modern storytelling's power to the Renaissance, a time when art itself began to tell gripping tales in ways that were utterly revolutionary. The Renaissance. Born in the awakening light of the 15th century, it was one of history's most transformative periods, a time that exploded with creativity and questioned everything humanity thought it knew. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael didn't simply paint or sculpt, they became philosophers of human emotion, storytellers who pulled apart reality and reshaped it into something more vivid. While their works stood still, eternal in frames and marble, they felt as dynamic as theater, their messages leaping directly into the hearts of their audiences. But how? What made Renaissance art such an electrifying form of storytelling? One of the cornerstones of Renaissance art was the technique of perspective. Think about the depth of field in a modern film, how the camera focuses on a character's face while the background blurs, or how a single landscape shot can make us feel the sheer scale of an open desert. This spatial awareness? It began with Renaissance painters. Before this period, Western art was often flat and unreal. The Renaissance flipped that on its head. Take, for example, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. This isn't just an image of 12 men and their teacher sharing a meal, it's a moment frozen in time. Through masterful use of perspective, Da Vinci directs every eye toward Christ in the center. The receding lines of architecture pull us emotionally inward, amplifying the drama of betrayal unfolding at that table. And is that so different from the way modern directors create tension with camera angles in a thriller? Today, storytellers use perspective to guide audiences' emotions, to foreshadow key moments or focus our attention where it matters most. But perspective wasn't the only trick Renaissance artists had up their sleeves. They were also masters of lighting and color, harnessing the intangible power of atmosphere. Fast forward to a steaming cup of coffee in an indie movie where soft golden lighting fills the screen. It evokes nostalgia, tenderness, memory. Now, rewind to Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew, with its stark contrasts between shadow and spotlight. In the painting, a piercing beam of light seems to awaken Matthew's destiny, mirroring the way modern screenwriters use lighting as a metaphor for epiphanies or transformations. Without the Renaissance, would we understand visual storytelling in this way? It's not just about snapping the camera, it's about painting the emotion on screen. Then there's composition. Renaissance artists were unparalleled choreographers of chaos. To them, the placement of every figure, object, and negative space wasn't accidental, but intentional storytelling. Michelangelo's creation of Adam on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, for instance, is pure story distilled into visual form. The gap between Adam's fingertip and God's hand, it's tension incarnate. In film terms, that gap is the cliffhanger moment before the hero's salvation, the final heartbeat before resolution. For Renaissance artists, every inch of the canvas told a story. For modern directors, every frame is a narrative decision. Renaissance art also honed character expression and emotion in ways that resonate deeply today. When you watch a close-up of an actor shedding tears, you're connecting to an age-old principle, the power of human emotion laid bare. Take Raphael's The School of Athens. Though it's a painting of philosophers, each character is immersed in their personalities. Plato is drawn upward with lofty aspirations, while Aristotle gestures downward in pragmatic contemplation. Artists of the Renaissance gave humanity to their subjects in ways that felt accessible rather than divine, paving the way for relatable storytelling in modern film and literature. But Renaissance art didn't stop at single-scene narratives. It also laid the groundwork for visual epics. Consider the era's frescoes and multi-paneled altarpieces, not so different from the way streaming shows unfold in episodic arcs. Think of a modern series like HBO's Game of Thrones with its sprawling cast, kingdoms, and interconnected struggles. Now compare it to Jan van Eyck's Ghent altarpiece, a masterpiece exploding with characters, world-building, and intertwined subplots. Both immerse audiences in sprawling narratives, showcasing tales within tales. The Renaissance didn't just influence storytelling techniques, it also challenged the way stories were told. This was the age of the dramatic moment, the freeze frame of history. In modern terms, think of the climatic shot in an action movie, the split second before the villain detonates the bomb, or the instant that a romance hinges on an unspoken kiss. To Renaissance artists, everything boiled down to that definitive moment. Botticelli's The Birth of Venus freezes the exact emotion of divinity and beauty springing into the world. This focus wasn't a mere snapshot, it was an invitation to live inside the climax, much like slow-motion sequences in cinema do today. And perhaps the greatest legacy Renaissance storytelling has left us lies in its archetypes. Whether it's the shrewd hero, the tragic martyr, or the cunning antagonist, Renaissance artists gave flesh to human archetypes that fill the silver screens and pages of books today. From biblical tales reimagined to mythological sagas brought to life, they created art that reflected universal truths about who we are and who we aspire to be, a mirror modern storytelling constantly gazes into. But why does this matter? Why look backward to look forward? Because understanding our history gives us greater clarity about our present. Renaissance art didn't just teach us how to craft compelling stories, it passed down an inheritance of techniques, ideas, and philosophies. When we marvel at the symmetry of a film or feel moved by a scene's lighting and depth, we're echoing centuries of craftsmanship. Modern storytelling often relies on technology, yet its roots are profoundly old. The Renaissance gave us tools that transcend time, tools to stir emotions, heighten drama, and make us care. And when we realize where our storytelling principles come from, we start to see the enduring beauty of this connection. So next time you're swept away by a blockbuster or captivated by a cinematic masterpiece, remember that somewhere in its DNA lies the artistic soul of a Michelangelo, a Caravaggio, or a Raphael. The Renaissance may have faded into marble statues and museum walls, but its influence is alive, living, breathing, thriving in the stories we tell today. That is its eternal gift, that is its modern triumph.